Okay, just so I make sure I'm not botching people's names, is it Tarsai?
Yes, Tarsai.
Tarsai, and is it Mikisha?
My Keisha, like not your Keisha, but my Keisha.
That was good, Mikisha. That helped. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I have a very functional question first, but we're going to go a whole different place in a moment. What are the ages of the students at this school in Arlington that you'll be serving?
12 to 18, right? That's what we said.
Yes,
Yes.
12 to 18.
High school or middle high.
Okay. So the opening slide and the name of this institution is incredibly powerful. The idea that it's all about connecting, and you guys tipped your hat a little bit, but I want to go there deeper. To what are we connecting? And you said the students connect themselves, to the adults and the folks in the school, and most importantly, ultimately, to the community. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Yes.
Then you said that it's all about belonging. So the power of this concept for me, and let me pause for a minute. I just want to offer that there's two rules to our discussion, if I could. And I want to make sure we align around these rules. Rule number one is don't accept anything that I'm saying until you test it for yourself. Grounded in your own personal experience to see if it has value for you, if it works. Rule number two is similar, but also I would invite you not to reject anything that I'm saying, again, until you test it for yourself, okay? All right. So core to this is that you've actually grounded this in a real place, a specific place, a particular place, Arlington, Virginia, right? So if we then can image that what you're really creating is the capacity, or actually an educational system within a particular place that is doing three lines of work simultaneously. At the first line is the individual student. The second line is the community within the school, who are the co-learners and co-creators, who are actually, and this is the one disconnect that I want to ask you guys to focus on, how are they truly in service to the community in which they are nested? So you guys defined a very clear governance system, bravo, by stating that the mission of the school would be driven by community members, and that the governance of the school would actually include active community members. Excellent. So let's get to that connection. What is the value of that connection?
I would say one of the values found in that connection is that they are exposed to the possibilities that they see around them. And it's not just limited to what the school says, but they're making connections with corporate leaders, the people that are grounded and connected to the community in which they live.
Also, to build off what Carla said, a lot of the, like what we talked about, the project-based learning is community-based. The community has to be involved and the students have to be aware of what are the problems their community is actually facing to be able to complete this education with fidelity. So I think, not only being connected to the community in, a personal sense, but also for, their academic journey as well. Their school is part of their academic, or their community is part of their academic journey.
They're also, like you said, they are nested in this community. So part of our mission is to instill self-efficacy through that sense of belonging. And the more that they can see themselves reflected in their community, and they build their identity with this school through building an identity within their community, that reinforces that sense of belonging.
Okay. So I just want to take that question and put it over here for a minute. We're going to come back to it. All right. So just park that, but let's keep holding it. Because then that leads to the next question is the power of community sourced. Notice I'm using the word sourced as opposed to based. And I think it's a critical distinction. We can unpack that if you'd like, but I don't think we need to right now. The idea that those community source projects are actually in service to, I think, Catherine, I heard you say solving problems in the community. I want to push harder against that. Is it just solving problems in the community?
We also talked about challenges too. And I think something which it didn't get put in the slideshow, it should have been, but like also that changes year to year, right? That's adaptive and it's fluid. And for one student, it might be a really different challenge or problem versus maybe another student. So that being said, I think we were talking a lot about making it adaptive for students, not a forced project, I should say.
So if we think of the community as a living system, a living whole of which each of these groups of students and each individual student is a part, nested, then the idea that these projects actually are in service to the community, what does that mean? I really want to understand how you're holding that. To be in service to the community means what? It's the same question asked in a different way, is what's the value of belonging?
I think I can answer that, or I can attempt to answer that. I think when we first began thinking about what we wanted to create and what we wanted to build, Anthony very wisely took us through the design thinking process because he had done that before. And it really sort of got us unfocused to be focused. And we looked at a specific community and decided that we wanted to sort of, I guess nest might be the best word, but I think the value would be that everyone would be learning and growing in a meaningful way that would be far more connected than any of the settings that we had ever taught or administered in. We wanted to provide an experience for not just our students, but we were thinking about staff and people that we would partner with outside, and then also how we could possibly even replicate beyond our setting. The idea just kept growing and growing. So I think the value, not to be redundant or kitschy at all, the value would be in the connections, in really deepening the connections so that we could build workforce and that we could build kids that stay and don't go and leave communities. I think that was our goal. And you guys can step into, I don't want to overspeak.
It's having that impact, right? So like you asked what the value of belonging is. Well, it's not, so we don't take it as you are kind of adapting to an existing structure or an existing system. You are impacting that system, and through that impact, you belong. Right?
That's it. So that comes back to what Catherine said, which I want to unpack a little bit, right? What's the difference between solving problems and manifesting potential? So I think, Anthony, you were beginning to enter into the realm of what doesn't yet exist. In other words, transformational work.
Mm-hmm.
Work that at that third line, that community line, what is the system within that community that each of these projects is seeking to actualize in service to transforming the vitality and viability of that community? Isn't that the value of belonging?
Mm-hmm.
So if that's true, what's the effect of actually focusing? And so the key is focusing on potential, not solving problems, right? Got it? First of all, you guys all get that, because that's a critical distinction. It is where it becomes regenerative instead of just doing good, right? So what's the effect? So Heather, you began to go there. You touched on two things. You said, maybe these folks will stay here. Maybe there's more employment opportunities. But what I'm asking you guys to do right now is image it. Image it. So there's a whole lot of you went through a whole lot of functional pieces. Well, we could create a garden, and we could do, all these pieces. I want you to image for a minute for me so that you can get it really clear in your heads. What does that look like when it's working? Describe that image for me of it actually working. And when I say working, it's not only succeeding, it's the process of it working in a way that's creating a new energy field in that community, or regenerating the already existent energy field in that community. So image that working for me and describe it, please.
What comes to mind for me is that the school becomes the heart of the community, and we can really impact the world around us. And we, as young students come in, they get to see older students contribute and really shift their environment to a more positive place that works for everyone.
So again, Carl, I'm going to push back a little bit. That's all great, mom and apple pie, like grounded in showing me an image of that working, please. I can think of 100. I want you guys to get really clear about that. So one way to do that, and I think it would, so first of all, the concept is brilliant, right? This whole notion, it may be one of the largest tragedies of our culture is this idea of belonging. I want to come back to ethnicity in a minute, right? Because I think that's deeply embedded in this as well. That whole idea of belonging has such powerful effects on each person beginning to realize and learning in a different way than I can just solve a problem. But I actually have a voice and a role to play in the transformative quality of this community. So I would say that if you start to examine effects, look at specific examples, and where your presentation might benefit dramatically is take one of those ideas you have about a project, experiential learning based community source project, and run it through the whole process and image it working. So you touched on one that was really powerful, but it just kind of felt like, oh, there's just another jelly bean I'm going to throw in the bowl, right? The whole idea of the community garden, and you tipped your hat to the connection to farmers. So if you took one community-based project that was specifically sourced for Arlington, Virginia, and ran it through how that might work, what it looks like, and imaging its potential, what would that look like? Talk to me. Unpack that. Tell me that. I want to hear that story.
You would have a chain of individuals that would be working together collaboratively, and the kids would have contact and the staff would have contact out in the community, and it would be amazing. I'm just trying to, like you said, image it in my mind, but you would have, an entire group of kids and staff partnered with a very specific group of folks in the community, and you could teach supply line, and you could explore a million different individual interests within the kids within one of those projects.
All right, keep going there. You just touched on something really important.
I'm imaging and talking at once. Go ahead, Anthony.
I know.
No,
That's
again, connect. It connects different aspects of this learning and developing process. And from, the garden itself and what it takes to actually build that garden and, you know, have that survive and be viable. And then what do you do with that? And how can we incorporate the community into that? How can we help the community? So it's not just a revenue stream for the school. It's, you know, providing where the community needs providing.
Good. So what's the value adding process? Just using, I'm trying to ground this in a very practical, concrete example so that we're not just talking abstraction, right? What's the value adding process that that particular project would deliver to the community's viability and vitality indefinitely?
Food. Like,
I'll keep going.
Sustainability is definitely something that we've talked about that would bring value to the community. So when you're talking about transformation and growth and progress, and ensuring the sustainability of that, there's so many different levels and elements within the concept of Connect that supports that to ensure that not only is the community thriving, but there's a level of sustainability in terms of that being a long-term possibility. So I think another thing we've also talked about that may have not been mentioned in the presentation is the idea of when students leave, they're not leaving for good. So, you know, students coming in and students who are either about to exit or older or alumni, mentoring and being a part of that community and continuing the growth so that there's a culture that's within the community that is very sustained with a level of pride because of the vitality that it's able to maintain within itself.
Okay.
And it has to do with the connections at the end of the day that are built within. So the connection within the community.
That's exactly where I want to go, is into these connections. I want to be in service to deepening your understanding of the value and effect of these connections so that you can actually sell this concept. So that you can be so clear with your imaging of it that it's real, right? So image for me a moment, a framework that I'd like to introduce that might help clarify this for you. So we call this the living system pentad. So draw a star like you learn to draw a star in kindergarten, 5-point star, or maybe first grade, right? And at the top of the star, write the word users, AKA students. If you come down to the lower right-hand leg of the star, write the word co-creators. Now take the line that goes up to the upper left-hand point of the star and write the word earth processes or earth systems, AKA sustainability. Now take that line horizontally over to the upper right-hand point of the star and write the word community. Now take that line down diagonally to the left to the last lower left-hand point of the star and write the word investors. So the question I was asking you is, what are the value-adding processes that you are delivering through these experiential, educational, project-based, community source projects? That's a lot of adjectives, right? But that's what it is, all in service to belonging and connecting. So if you were to look at this system, what I'm suggesting, remember rule number 1, rule number 2, you are working with the whole living system. In this case, it happens to be called a community named Arlington, Virginia. For that system to constantly evolve its vitality and viability, I'm proposing that your process, this entity you're creating, for it to be a non-displaceable entity, which I think is your aim, must deliver value-adding processes to all 5 sets of those stakeholders in balance. This is not to say that as a community member, I'm only in the community set of stakeholders. I may also be a teacher. I may be a parent of a student. I may be a volunteer and therefore an investor in the school. I may also be a farmer and working on regenerative sustainability. So in other words, it's not that each individual belongs in one of those. It's more the idea of those sets of stakeholders. So now I'll ask the question again. Using one example of a project that would be engaged by a group of students in Connect, what specifically would be value-adding processes that could be delivered to any one of those 5? Pick one. Notice it's not value you're delivering. You're not delivering food. Well, you are, but that's not the intent. That's not the ultimate aim or purpose of the process. You're delivering value-adding processes, which I'm going to suggest literally means building the capacity of each of those sets of stakeholders to increase their stake and investment in the entity. So value-adding processes, I would suggest, are always about capacity building. So another way to ask the question, which I'll ask again, another way, is what's the capacity you are seeking to develop through Connect in each of these 5 sets of stakeholders?
So when you say capacity, like mindset almost, or like what value they're getting out of it, or
So I already asked that question. What's the value of this?
yeah.
Right? So now I'm shifting it to value-adding process, right? Value-adding process means you're in service to their development, their capacity to continually increase their stake in the game. These 5 points are often called stakeholders. Well, a stakeholder has a stake in the game. Unless they are being reciprocally delivered value-adding processes, they're going to remove their stake. What you want to do, and in order for this to become, again, rule number 1 and rule number 2, this framework is suggesting that in order for this Connect entity to become a non-displaceable entity, it must deliver value-adding processes to all 5 sets of stakeholders in balance.
I'm gonna say this. I think that the connection, the ability to have those connections for all of those people that have all of those stakes, and seeing that realized and what that could do for not just how they connect with the school, but how they connect with other businesses that are connecting together, how they're connecting with social services, how they're connecting. It wouldn't just be their connection with us. It would be how that whole community connected through us. And then I think the benefits could be immeasurable in a way that sort of produces the Connect philosophy. The whole point of what we're doing is for our kids to learn to make connections, our staff to learn to make connections, and to really be a part of making things in that community really so everyone is getting value from it. And, you know, like from every little tiny project that we would do, it would just be such that we could make stronger connections, if not always more, to sustain.
So Heather, you're on it, because what you just identified is that this is a system. These 5 entities, that's why I had you draw the lines, is they're all deeply interrelated, right? So again, let's ground this. All I'm trying to do is offer you guys a framework to clarify your thinking so well that you would show this to people and they would say, of course, why have we done this 100 years ago, right? Because just the idea of connection, everybody says, yeah, no, that makes sense, blah, blah, blah. But almost nobody spends time unpacking what that really means, what the value of it is, and what the effects could be by imaging it. So I'm inviting you to pick just one project. And I happen to just pick the community garden because it resonated with me. I used to have a farm, right? Walk me through how that project could be in service to delivering value-adding processes in balance to all 5 sets of stakeholders.
I think also when we talked about like the farmer's garden, like right with the weekend. So like we talked about utilizing like community members to also that are farmers or health nutritionists to take to host classes and things like that. So like the project or the garden could be utilized in many ways, not only, you know, the students.
Catherine, be particular. That's what I'm asking you to do. In what ways? So why bother is the question.
Or like,
Well, so the users, the students, they connect with, co-creators like the farmers in the community and whatnot who, established this,
And
which
teachers are also
improves.
co-creators, right?
What's that?
And the teachers are also co-creators.
Yeah, like that.
And the
Yep.
governance. Yep.
Yep. Which improves the sustainability of everything, keeps, that connection keeps everything going. It contributes to the community overall that the school is nested in, that it helps them build through the farmers market and whatever else we do with the products of the community garden, which shows that investors that this is worth investing in. It
self-sustains.
yeah, the community is part of the investors, so like they are getting return on their investment, which goes back to the users being proud and seeing their impact on how this project impacts the greater community around them. And as they move on and become other members within this system, they interact with that same project just in a different way. So they're still part of it. They're still part of that, no matter when they move from user to co-creator to community, they're still part of that project.
It enhances self-efficacy, which we also mentioned with the social emotional learning being a huge part of the curriculum as well, which they will take hopefully not only at school, but beyond.
Anyone you want to be, anywhere you want to go. That's our motto,
Well, yeah, you said that was in, I think, your second slide, right?
Mhm.
So what's the value to you guys in really developing, I would say more concretely, this idea of exploring that pentad and taking a real example of a project, running it through that, and be so rigorous with yourselves that you're forcing yourselves to actually image it working and present that on a slide? What would be the value of that in let's just say going to the Arlington public school system and saying, hey, we have an idea, check this out, what do you think?
It's concrete as opposed to theoretical.
That's exactly what I'm getting at. But I think to get concrete, we have to leave the world of existence. We have to not just solve problems that bring us back up to the same line. We have to go up here in our imaging. So that's why I'm asking you guys to image it working, and then look at those interconnections between those five, which, by the way, I would invite you guys to spend a day just working on this. And from that, you can now derive some principles that will guide how you develop the process of making this happen. Principles that will ensure that value-adding process will be delivered in balance to all the stakeholders who have a stake in the game, right? Does that make sense?
Very much.
All right. So one of the very early things you said, which really resonated with me, was the whole idea of ethnicity and diversity, right? So you talked about it like you tipped your hat, but I would love to hear how you're thinking about that through the lens and context of connection and belonging. So you just said, hey, we really want to help folks understand their ethnicity. Okay, great. What's the role of that in connect and belonging? Help me.
Well, I'll say that the goal here is for people to be whole. In our society today, we have entire communities who are considered less than. But when we understand our connections to past, our contributions, people can be empowered to really change the world around them, which I believe.
Finish that
If.
statement.
if they understand that they are powerful, that their culture is powerful, and that they have a history of contributing to the world.
And a unique contribution to make in service to the diversity of the larger whole, right? Is that
Yeah.
accurate?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. So if that's accurate, some of the most diverse places in the world are zoos, right? They have more species in, 1 hectare than almost any place in the world. It's not quite true, but kind of true, right? Is that a viable living system?
No, because you have to also not only understand your own culture and what influences your behaviors and your mindsets, but you also have to consider that somebody else's is different. Whether you understand their mindset and their behaviors and what's contributing to those is one thing, but you have to at least understand that not everybody thinks like you do. Not everybody reacts like you do. Not everyone behaves like you do. And when you see something that is different, be curious about it. That's okay. Engage with it. That's fine, because that's how we learn. We expose ourselves to different cultural norms to develop that, understanding for other cultures, and to be able to operate from within another culture that is different than our own.
Okay,
As
fine.
opposed
Is
to
Arlington a highly
separating.
is Arlington a highly diverse place? Is there big diversity in Arlington?
Not that I know of, no, not particularly, but yeah.
Well, I see some nodding and some shaking.
Well, I would say that it is diverse because it's right outside Washington, D.C., which was another reason we chose that location. And it is a place where lots of cultures inhabit.
Okay, so I want to use the metaphor of the zoo again. Think of all the different species in the zoo. You have zookeepers who deliver very specific kinds of food and care to one species over here, and a very different kind of set of processes and food, just as an example, to another species over here, whereby if those species were all interconnecting and being in service to developing a larger whole system where they are in reciprocal interrelationship, then you could begin to take the zookeepers away, right? So can you see where I'm trying to go with this metaphor? Because I think the reconciling force that you guys are bringing to the table is at the core of your work. Connect, thereby belong in a larger whole system called a community, which is made up of reciprocal interrelationships that are delivering value-adding processes to this vastly diverse group of humans and species. Now, if you were to image that, and that's the image you're holding for Connect, how does that shift how you're thinking about Connect?
Well, that means that it is a model for the nation, where we have learned to value the contributions of all and see that it is a base of creativity and life.
So now you're starting to identify effects, Carla. This is where I was trying to head in this whole conversation. Because if your presentation could clearly identify that image in a way that any one of us could look at it and say, oh my God, we need this. We may not survive without it. Now you've got a non-displaceable entity. You understand what I mean by a non-displaceable entity? All it means is if it's not there, the community suffers as opposed to just doing better because it is here, right? And the reverse of that is because it's here, it's actually constantly developing and the way Catherine talked about it in terms of it being a dynamic process, that community is constantly evolving, constantly. Therefore, what's the capacity you're seeking to develop in every one of these stakeholders? And I'm just going to hold it to the students, because if you can answer that question, I think you can start to see the value and effect of this idea. What's the capacity you're seeking to build in the students of Connect?
I think self-efficacy and, you know, a sense, I keep wanting to say belonging.
So that's what I'm trying to
Well-
get you. I want you to really unpack those words.
Yeah,
I've heard self-efficacy 4 times in this
I
conversation.
know.
What
Like,
does that mean? What does that look like? What's its effect? What's its value?
Yeah, just boosting the confidence and the knowledge that they can, they can achieve, and they have the capacity to do that. They have the tools that they need to do that. They have the knowledge, they have the self-confidence.
and understanding of others.
And understanding that they deserve to achieve. And, they will achieve because of all of these different like personality building, components come together. And, it's a toolbox. It's a toolbox of things that they have for achievement.
Okay, I've been dancing around this and trying to come at it from like 4 different ways. So this is very complex. One of the things that I think we suffer from in our educational system is we try to oversimplify complexity rather than building our capacity to manage and work with complexity. So it's really about understanding and deepening the complexity, not dumbing it down, right? So with that in mind, I have a thought that I would offer you that isn't what you're really trying to build through connections and belonging, is the capacity of each person to manifest, bring into being that which they care about deeply, which solely they possess because they are an individual essence unlike every other being that's ever lived.
That's not what I said.
So so this is the image I want to leave you with. Image a community, a world where everybody is actually being invited and actually being served in building their capacity to manifest their unique genius, their unique contribution for which they were probably born. Otherwise, from my cosmology, they wouldn't be here. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Think again of how nature works. Every one of those species is in deep. So one way to image that is I used this example in the last call. Image the effect, the range of effect of a single tree. Pick a tree you know. Image it. Put it in your head right now. Right? What's the range of effect of that tree? One individual tree. And then start to look at all the interconnections that tree has with all of the other beings in its domain. And then you start to look at a tree in a forest. And what we've started to understand only within the last 30 years is the whole forest itself is one organism. Those trees are actually interconnected with microscopic fungal mycelia in the soil that is transferring information and nutrients back and forth between all the trees in the forest. Now that's connection and belonging, because that tree never leaves its place. So these are the kinds of images that I'm inviting you guys to connect with, because that individual tree is unlike any other tree that's ever belonged. And I'm saying the same thing about each of these students. There's never been a being, a singularity like each of these individuals. There never will be again. If you want physical evidence of that, just look at their fingerprints, right? So if we can be holding that the capacity we're building is for each individual student to understand and be given the agency to contribute to the system in which they are connected, in this case, the second line work, all the co-creators and the community within the school, to build their capacity to deliver those value-adding processes to the entire community. Now what we're holding is that we're working at 3 levels always simultaneously. And that's the systemic way of thinking that I'm inviting you guys to engage through a concrete example that you could very simply identify in a presentation. I would go, holy shit, we got to do this. Is this making sense to you?
Mm-hmm.
Very much.
Okay, I think I'm done.
So, before we end, do any of you have any questions for John, since he has been questioning you? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, it's fair.
John, have you ever built a school?
I've designed about 10.
Did you like it? Was it something that was engaging for you? Because I think it sounds like it might be. It's wonderful to chat.
Yeah.
So I will say that
I think you're passionate.
there have been at least, well, in every case, it was deeply fulfilling. That's not to say there weren't challenges, because there always are.
Of course.
But the 2 that I enjoyed the most were schools for kids with learning disabilities. And the reason for that is because the very idea of a school that is addressing ADD, dyslexia, and executive functioning disorder must address the individual child as a whole being, to borrow Carla's statement about the whole human. But the whole human as a very particular entity, because each of these kids learns in a very different way than the sort of industrialized model we've been superimposing on all of our children.
John, do you have those? Do you have those videos still on the 7 Group?
Yeah.
Website? Yeah, I'll send you the 7 Group website link, and I believe those videos are there. Some of those schools.
Yeah, the 3 that you want to look at are the Willow School, Winston, and I don't think we have the Janus School up there.
It's not. Is it up there?
I don't think so.
Yeah. Okay. That's
Yeah.
in Lancaster County, guys.
Yeah, that was the first one. That was my first sort of adventure into. So, guys, that was a life-changing project for me. So I just tell you a very quick story. The day that I met the executive director and his good lieutenant, who were helping the community, the school didn't exist yet. There was well, it kind of did. It was in a rented facility, but the community created this because they realized that the public school system was not serving a distinct percentage of their population. So a bunch of those parents literally got together and said, hey, let's make a school. So they hired these 2 guys from Columbia University who had specialized in understanding system thinking through the instrument of learning disabilities, they were called at the time. And so I met these 2 guys, and we were having lunch, and they were explaining what the heck it was that they were doing. And it suddenly struck me, oh my heavens, the responsibility you guys have, you're not dealing with just the student, you're dealing with the entire familial system, which is exactly what they needed to do, because in that population, those students are often given a role in the family of being the failure, right? So that familial conditioning is how they got their attention. So if they started to succeed, then they would no longer get the attention of the role that had developed in the family. So they actually, in the design of the school, we had to build observation rooms to bring parents in because the kids wouldn't replicate the behavior that they were doing in school at home because they'd be too successful. It was like so mind-bending to me that it was the first time I began to understand that that child is nested in a system of not only the school, but a family and then the larger community. So that was the first time I really started to realize the impact of, wow, how can we design a series of spaces that will, in fact, manifest the potential of that individualized, yet at the same time belonging, because that became key, way of educating. So sorry, Heather, that was a longer answer than I think you wanted.
No, it actually, that was totally fine. I had a chance to work in Chapel Hill and build a school within a community group. It was a middle school. It wasn't like for special needs kids, but it had a large population. So it was very cool to hear. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions for John? Okay. So,
Well, I have one last question for you guys.
Good.
It's more just, it's asking for reflection. So one of the things we find in our regenerative work is the value of reflection. Because all of us are going to click off this Zoom and we're going to go off and have dinner or hang out with our family or do all the other things we have to do, get some, who knows what it is. We're going to go do 1,000 other things on our list. And if we don't pause, slow down the flow for a moment and identify what is shifting in my thinking right now that I can internalize and hold, then we're likely going to lose it. Again, rule number one and rule number two. This is only from my own personal experience. It happens to me all the time, right? So any reflections from any of you on how this discussion is shifting how you're thinking about Connect?
I would just say that a school like this would serve people of color in ways that have been ignored for hundreds of years. And to have that opportunity to grow children into whole human beings would be a phenomenal service to the world that typically undervalues us.
Carla, I would love to be part of that.
I'm personally thinking about, in addition to everything we were talking about, shifting from the idea of theoretical to actualization.
So
like how to make these things happen and not have it remain a dream or an idea.
So Tarsai. So one of my favorite philosophers is actually Pythagoras. So we all know Pythagoras because he taught us how to calculate the hypotenuse of a triangle, but he had a whole school in ancient Greece. And one of his fundamental principles was this: it is only when the concrete comes into contact with the abstract that anything new can happen. So in other words, if we're spending all our time in the concrete, nothing new is going to happen. We're only spending all our time in the abstract, nothing new is going to happen. We need to do this with them, which is what I've been trying to get you guys to see and experience in this whole call. So thank you.
Thank you.
So not to move away from your reflection, the question we're asking all the teams is, what do you want to do with this?
Yeah. Make this happen, guys. How are you going to make this happen?
Yeah, I mean, you're a cohort. You've spent time putting it together.
Well, Carla said we should ask for money. So,
Uh,
John, you want to invest?
Oh, yeah, you mean that, John? No, seriously, we're thinking about this because, and the reason I'm saying that is, and we'll probably get in touch with you, you know, all of these have some very interesting potential. And, you know, John, what I'm thinking about is the commonality among them are interesting, you know, to kind of see where we can get a mix and going forward, you know, the possibilities. But the question is, your team, and obviously you're the cohort in DC, you know, what do you want to do with this? I mean, you know, you invested time. Yeah, it's in a class, but as I've said to all of you, the purpose of these courses are not for you to get a dissertation. It's more important that when you leave the program, what do you leave with? You know,
what if these guys all got together and did a co-dissertation and developed this concept?
I know I got to deal with that one later. I told you that. That's been my hope, that we could do group dissertations because other universities are.
Yeah, let's rethink the purpose of dissertation, for heaven's sakes.
Yeah, well,
Instead of being a thick bunch of paper on a shelf.
yes, but we got this
Discuss.
monolith called the provost's office at Drexel.
Yeah. We could build a whole city out of old dissertations.
Yeah, right. So, but no, it's something, and I'm dead serious about this. I want you guys to think about this, and I want you to think about what John asked you to process, that around, you know, the star that you created, those interactions, because again, from my point of view, the hard part that you had dealing with this was the word capacity. What are the capacities that you're really trying to nurture in each one of those points? You know, I think that becomes a critical point, in that when you can get into that and begin to image that more and more, then it might give you some sense of, okay, how do we make this become, and I know, John, you don't want to use the word concrete, but I'm using that abstract versus concrete.
You know, I've been searching for another word because
Yeah.
concrete's not very sustainable. So
So
maybe you guys come up with one for me and let me know.
Yeah. So really, I honestly want you guys to think about that. And obviously, you know, we'll continue contacting around this. John and I, and actually, as I said, Michael Kozak, who is part of the faculty too, and he's a former superintendent, you know, we've been talking about some things. We might get back to you to talk about some possibilities. And I'm dead serious about this because, you know, I'm getting tired of seeing you guys put all this energy into this stuff. And I'm talking about other cohorts who've come up with some really interesting stuff. But then, you know, as John said, you pull away from this and it just goes into ether, you know. And the question is, you know, since you've got some real good stuff here, that
The essence of what you guys identified.
Yeah, it's great.
Spot on.
Yeah, it honestly is. And what's interesting about this, and I'll say this, is that you guys are at a disadvantage right now because a person has really influenced John is a lady by the name of Carol Sanford. And she now is going to be integrated greatly into the 845 class, and her ideas of regenerative life, regenerative thinking, regenerative business, all those good things that she's put together, of which what I'm going to say to you is that the next series of cohorts that are going to come out of this are probably going to have at least a little deeper understanding of what John's asking. So it means he can really go after them, you know, in terms of this, because this is going to be, I think, important, but more importantly, you as developing leaders, you know, the transactional leaders or the transitional leaders into the future need to really think about these and begin to actualize them in your own lives and in the environments that you're working in. But in this moment, you're a team and you've developed something, and I don't want to see it dissipate. And we're going to try to figure out some way, if you guys are willing to do that, that we'll find some avenues to make this thing work.
Besides, John and I are going to be dead soon. We need you guys to do this
Yes,
stuff.
that's right. And I'll probably be dead sooner than him.
Not a little bit, maybe. We'll
Yeah.
never know.
We'll see. So with that, I think, geez, I've been recording this. So